she told me, I knew she was going to die. She knew she was going to die. And I think he did too. And she told me that she was only holding on as long as she could for Grandma. And we talked a lot about what it was like on the other side. And I shared with her my near-death experience. And she told me after this meditation, she goes, I know who my new parents are going to be. She goes, I've seen it. He held my hands and we meditated and I saw it. And she goes, and I'm not scared anymore. I want to go. I'm in so much pain here. I want to go. And boy, I could relate to that statement. So I really wanted to feel different. I wanted to feel better. I didn't want to have this pain and suffering any longer. So I got into meditation. And very quickly when I got into meditation, I fell right into line. Everything started happening. I mean, I was going in leaps and bounds. I started to get back to all those intuitions that I had when I was a kid. I started to have those lucid dreams again. I started to have those memories of past lives. And I started to feel like the old me again. But then that little ticky in my head said, oh, it's going to come get you now. And sure as shit, when I was meditating, I saw flying in the background that dragon. And I went, oh, it's coming for me. And I stopped meditating at that point. I ran again. I was scared. And that was the pinnacle low point of my life. Everything that else that had ever happened to me, the abuses I'd suffered, were nothing compared to this, because this I did to myself. This was me cowering and turning my back on this connection that I felt was so beautiful and so pure. I couldn't take the person I was anymore. I did not want to be this coward. I really thought that if I meditated again, this thing was going to kill me. But it didn't matter. I'd rather have that happen than live like a coward. The way I looked at it, I was living on borrowed time anyway. I should have died way back when I was 9 years old. So me being here, you know, I had children at that point. You know, I had a business. I had a house. None of it mattered to me because I wasn't doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I wasn't serving God. And I couldn't take that anymore. And I wasn't going to live like that any longer. I waited for the house to be empty. And I actually wrote a goodbye note to my wife and my fiance at the time and my kids, because I really thought I was going to die in this meditation. But I wasn't going to cower any longer. I was going to face this demon. I wasn't going to run and be scared anymore. I was tired of being scared. And this time I meditated and I sought it out. I called it in my mind and I said, come on, I'm ready for you. I don't care. And there it was, going by, and almost like a fighter jet, it banked as it turned, and it zipped right towards me, and it still was as grimacing and as evil and as mean as I remember. And it came right up and got right in my face. And all I thought was, I am love. I surrendered myself to it. And I just kept saying in my head, I am love. I am love. I am love. And it got right in my face. And I just kept saying, I am love. And I saw this grimace, evil face start to melt. And it turned into a smile. And it sat there and it nodded its head. And when I said, I'm in love, I am love, it passed right through me. And came out the other side like this wisp. And it faded away. It faded into nothingness. And I was like, whoa, that's not what I expected. I was like, okay, what the heck does that mean now? Few weeks later, I was at my dad's house. He wanted me to meet this lady. She was a professor at St. Thomas University at the time. And I walk in the door to meet her. Her name's Dr. Elizabeth Ferrara. And she looks at me. And she goes, oh, when she sees me. And she bows her head. And she holds my hand. And she goes, I remember you. You were my teacher in a former life. And at that point, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I could be nobody's teacher. I'm like so screwed up. You don't even know how screwed up I am. I could not be a teacher. And she goes, no, no, no. You were my teacher. I remember. You're a great Shambhala master. I said, Shawa? She goes, Shambhala. And it sounded familiar, but You know, it was like one of those things like when you're coming out of amnesia and your mouth is like trying to form, your tongue's trying to form the word. And I said, okay, you know, please stop doing this. She goes, no, you're Buddhist, aren't you? And I just started to study Buddhism. And I really don't like isms, you know, and I can't define myself today as anything. I am very spiritual and spirit-filled, and I have a great communion with what I know to be God, and whatever name you choose to call it, whether it's God or Source or the Great Spirit or the, you know, whatever, is great because it's all the same to me. But back then I was just on the path of Buddhism, and I said, well, you know, I just started studying Buddhism. I said, but I don't consider... Okay, yeah, I'm Buddhist. And looking at my dad, who was this, you know, devout Catholic on the board of St. Thomas University, I thought he was going to poop in his pants. And she goes, no, you're a Shambhala master. And a few weeks later, she gives me this book, and it's called Shambhala, The Path of the Warrior, or The Sacred Warrior. And I start reading the book, and there are two sacred deities that are protectors of the Shambhala lineage, and one of them is this flying red dragon. And I thought, ooh, boy, okay, now it's starting to make sense. I sacrificed myself once freely out of love. Then I didn't have that same love. I did not have that same compassion. I was ego. I was trapped to my body. I didn't willingly want to give. It took me to the point where I was ready to give it all up, to be back with God, because I was unhappy with how I was living, and I wasn't going to sacrifice that connection for my ego, for my vanity any longer. I was ready to let it all go. And when I did that, and I was willing to sacrifice myself for love again, that's when the connection reaffirmed itself. It was the second test on my path. And since then, there's been several others, and I'll share those as I go on. This connection to God